Welcome back to my Pokémon Platinum Hardcore Nuzlocke walkthrough. In the last episode, we explored the areas around Oreburgh City, obtained our first gym badge from Rourke, and made our way north to Floroma Town. The last episode was also far too short for my liking, so we'll be looking to have a bit of a meatier video today. Valley Windworks, Eterna Forest, and Eterna City are up next. The road from Gen 4 Casual to Platinum Master continues. Let's do this. Before we head into Valley Windworks to deal with Team Galactic, I leveled up our current team a bit so we can be as overly prepared as possible for the fight against Mars. Before I talk about that though, quick note on training at the Valley Windworks: just be very careful when fighting any Buizel or Pachirisu in the wild or against trainers. Buizel normally come with Pursuit, which can easily take out a frail or weakened party member, and Pachirisu will often go for Bide, which can be scary if you've got a slower Pokemon out and can't run away or cleanly switch into something else. Moving on to Mars though, she is typically infamous for her very bulky and speedy Purugly, which normally isn't a super great Pokemon, but when you're dealing with it as early in the game as it is, it's definitely a challenge. If this is your first time going through a Platinum Nuzlocke, I would highly recommend over-preparing for this fight. Rock and fighting types in particular will do very nicely here, especially with the likes of Geodude and even Onix. Having either one of those leveled up should give you a great advantage. Having an Intimidate user such as Staravia, Gyarados, or Luxio to switch into on Purugly is also a very good strategy to have. In our case, we've got a mixture of all three of those advantages, with Geodude, Monferno, and Staravia, so I think we should just be fine here. Let's get into it. I lead with Psyduck to take out Zubat, just to be on the safe side. As I mentioned earlier in the run, Psyduck is fairly expendable to me at this point, so I'm fine with putting him in this position. After some back and forth, Zubat finally succumbs to Psyduck's Super Soaker Onslaught. And with Purugly out now, the plan is to switch into Staravia to get in an attack drop with Intimidate. And it's also recommended to switch on Purugly's first attack anyway, as you can count on it being Fake Out, which would normally prevent your Pokemon from moving anyway. We get hit for a moderate amount of damage, but then we go for the Pluck to successfully steal the Fat Cat's Oranberry and deal a moderate amount of damage of our own. I should be safe from a crit here, so I go for another Pluck to bring Purugly down to about 1/3, and everything's been going very smoothly so far. I switch into Geodude now to take the incoming Scratch, and then after easily taking a Feint Attack on the following turn, Geodude pops a meaty Magnitude and Mars goes down. That may have looked very easy, but that's only because we brought the best possible tools for the job. If you're not packing a Rock type or an Intimidate user, tread with caution. Even though I have gone through Platinum once now, I completely forgot about this random guy. Sharon, whatever his name is. Maybe I just wasn't paying enough attention the last time, but he doesn't seem to be very memorable. Now that Team Galactic has vacated the premises, we get a nice wholesome moment between this little girl and her father. And it concludes with a perfect segue into our next encounter. But not before being interrupted by Looker again. I won't comment on this guy too much more, as he's honestly not very helpful or interesting in my opinion. Like, he's basically a special agent, but all he does is either show up on the scene after you've already taken care of everything, or even worse, he'll show up before you do and tell you that you should go in ahead of him while he dicks around doing God knows what. I guess he's got a pretty unique personality, at least compared to most characters in the Pokemon series. I just feel like he's memorable for the wrong reasons. With Looker now out of the way, we head back to Floroma to heal up our party, and then head back to Valley Windworks to pick up that encounter. Now sure, you could grab a Buizel or a Shellos, and hopefully not a Pachirisu, and those two are pretty formidable Pokemon, but we do have other chances to obtain them. What we're going to do for this playthrough though, is grab the very unique Driffloon, which can actually be seen in the overworld here every Friday. I wanted to go with this as our encounter here, as I've never played with one before, but I've heard it's pretty good. Early ghost types are obviously always useful for something, but this line also comes with an additional immunity in ground. Driffloon has a pretty unique set of moveset options as well, including a more utility-based package with stuff like Stockpile and Baton Pass, while also having great offensive options with Shadow Ball, Thunderbolt, and even something like Silverwind could be tempting. With how Driffloon's stats are distributed, you really could go either route. Checking on our newest party member, and we not only get the mild nature, which will give our balloon a nice offensive boost, but we also get the better of Driffloon's 2 abilities in Unburden. Aftermath is obviously not super useful when the goal is to not lose any of your Pokemon, but Unburden is fantastic and should definitely come in handy during the run. We finally say goodbye to this area of the map and begin heading north towards Eterna Forest. The southern end of Route 205 here isn't too interesting, with the majority of the items picked up being pretty standard, and there's really nothing to comment regarding the trainer battles either. As the run progresses though, I'll definitely be looking to go over some of the random trainers that you should be aware of, as there are a lot more in Platinum that can catch you off guard when you compare them to the games that came before it. Before we enter Eterna Forest, we'll pick up our next encounter in Buizel. I was expecting the Shellos here with that 45% encounter rate, but I am totally cool with this. Floatzel is an excellent water type of the glass cannon variety. It's fast, hits hard, and comes with great moves to back up that style. You've got your standard surf and ice beam options, but you've also got some awesome physical based choices with Waterfall, Ice Fang, Priority Aqua Jet, Crunch, Dig, and Brick Break. And there are some key fights in this game in which speed can make a huge difference. I mean, we're looking at a potential answer to Cynthia's Garchomp here. Evolution comes at level 26. I mean, there's not much to complain about. Just keep in mind that they're both made of paper, so use them wisely. And now we enter one of my favorite places in Sinnoh, the enchanting Eterna Forest. I really do love this place. The atmosphere, the music, it almost feels like its own place, like it's disconnected from the region outside of it. Definitely one of the best forest areas in Pokemon in general. Right away, we meet up with Cheryl, who will be accompanying us on our journey through the forest, and it's one of the talking points I want to start with first regarding this place. Let's begin with the pros. One of the good things about having Cheryl by our side is that she'll heal our Pokemon for us after every single battle, whether that's against a wild Pokemon or a trainer. This is great, and it means we can spend pretty much an eternity here if we wanted to. Her Chansey will also participate in all of the battles that we have, including against wild Pokemon, making Eterna Forest a fantastic grinding spot in preparation for the second gym, since you'll save a lot of time by avoiding all the animations and load time facing off against Pokemon one at a time. Now, Cheryl does come with some setbacks though in my experience. Since every battle will now be a double battle, you run the risk of opposing trainers doubling up on your own Pokemon, which will increase the chance of losing a team member. This wouldn't be such a big deal if Cheryl's Chansey could actually deal decent damage, but while not the worst, it's definitely not helping your situation. You'll have to do most of the heavy lifting, and that will make battles drag out a bit longer. However, the most awkward part about Cheryl is obtaining your encounter here. In order to obtain your encounter, you need to remove one of the 2 wild Pokemon you run into first, before you can start throwing Pokeballs. Well, that's easier said than done when Chansey just attacks whatever it wants, whenever it wants, often removing the encounter you were trying to receive. This isn't the biggest of deals, as most of the Pokemon you can obtain in the forest aren't game changers or anything, and you do have the option to knock out Cheryl's Chansey yourself if you want to attempt to make the catching process easier. But it's still just annoying. Speaking of our encounter for Eterna Forest, there may be 2 Pokemon on the screen right now, but only Bidoof is legitimate, since we already have a Wurmple in our possession. Since both Pokemon are basically harmless at this level, I do opt to kill off Cheryl's Chansey first, to avoid any issues with this encounter. I can then dispose of Cascoon and start throwing Pokeballs at our newest team member. The Bidoof line has everything going for it, honestly, other than the fact that they're grass types. Unfortunately, Generation 4 is, in general, not very kind to our plant-based friends, with a lot of poor matchups defensively. But Roserade's stats are awesome, and Rosalia's move pool options are basically unlimited, so you can really build them out however you want. I have a soft spot for Pokemon that have great utility and defensive options, while also remaining very flexible, and with that being said, I'm gonna use this thing. Roserade is of course a stone evolution, so I will have to wait until I can pick up a shiny stone around the 6th gym or or so before I can use him. But that's not a big deal, considering Rosalia has a bunch of moves it needs to learn anyway before I can make that transition. After wandering around the forest for just a bit longer, we've reached the end where it's finally time to say goodbye to Cheryl for the rest of the run. She gives us the Soothe Bell as a thanks for helping her get through the forest, which is a really nice pickup this early in the game. I think it actually comes way later in Diamond and Pearl if I'm not mistaken, so it's nice to get it now, especially with all of the friendship evolutions in this game. There are a ton of guaranteed ones, by the way, which we'll get into later. While we do say goodbye to Cheryl, we won't have to wave goodbye to the forest for too long, as we'll come back to check out the abandoned mansion on the northernmost end of the area. Now on the other side of Route 205, and on the surface there doesn't appear to be anything special here. But I will mention now that 90% of the Pokemon carried by trainers here are Magikarp. Why is that important? Well, in my experience so far, I have found rebattling these trainers, especially this one right here in particular, to be the fastest EV training method for speed, which is definitely one of the most important stats to be worked on. We obviously don't have the Versus Seeker yet, but once we do, we will most certainly be coming back here at some point in the run. Now that Route 205 is done with for now, we finally reach Eterna City. Outside of the required Explorer's Kit, which can allow us to obtain a fossil Pokemon later on, as well as Move Tutor Shards and potentially Evolution Stones, we can also pick up the hidden Dragon Plate behind the statue in town, and we can also grab the Friendship Checker app from the Pokemon Center. This app is one of the more handy ones for sure. I really hate having to guess in most other games, and like I mentioned before, there are a ton of friendship evolutions in this game. I take a nice relaxing walk through the rest of town to the south, where we can grab ourselves the experience share from Professor Rowan's assistant. And with that, let's get into the gym. I bet you thought this episode was over, but I told you it was gonna be a meaty one. As I navigate through the puzzles and trainers, it's probably a good time to mention that there won't be a team review for this one, because, well, I mean, as you can imagine, I don't think we'll have any issues with Monferno and Staravia in the lineup. To be honest though, there may not ever be a team review for Gardenia in the future, due to the sheer number of encounters you obtain up to this point that deal with her Pokemon effectively. Her squad is actually really cool and interesting, but the chances that you don't have something that can basically wall her entire team with at this point are slim if not zero. Monferno, Staravia, Kricketune, Dustox/Beautifly, Driffloon, Golbat, Kadabra if you went with the trade back in Orberg, and even Gyarados is going to perform perfectly fine against these grass types early on in the game. It's just the plight of the grass typing, I guess. With the trainers now cleared out, it's time to get our second badge. Let's do this. Leading off with Monferno, and I go for the Flame Wheel, hoping to hit the range on the one-hit KO. And luckily, we get it. This Turtwig isn't too difficult to deal with necessarily, but he does tend to take more than one hit most of the time, and that allows Gardenia to get up a Reflect for the rest of her team, which would have been very annoying. Cherrim comes in next, and Flame Wheel is just not enough to get the kill this time, so we do end up getting hit with the Leech Seed. Another annoying setup that's very frustrating to deal with. Gardenia does not opt in for any healing on Cherrim, and so with one more Flame Wheel, it eventually falls. And now we deal with Gardenia's ace, Roserade. Roserade will still hit very hard with all of those early stats, and I was honestly a little worried towards the end of this fight. Monferno does get off one single Flame Wheel for massive damage before I'm forced to switch into Staravia, and Magical Leaf is chunking hard. I actually had to avoid a crit to avoid losing our flyer early, but thankfully it all works out, and another pluck brings Roserade down. Maybe I'm not giving Gardenia the credit she deserves? I mean, if I was without both Monferno and Staravia here, things could have been completely different. But at least for now, we obtain our second badge, and the first attempt remains deathless. And with that, this episode is now over. A few more core members added to the team, and some boss fights dealt with along the way. Things are looking good. In the next episode, we've got another tough fight in Team Galactic's Jupiter. We'll grab our bike and continue to explore the new routes ahead of us. In the meantime, as usual, please like the video if you liked it, and subscribe for more content like this. That's it for me. I'll see you next time.